Hello, my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're here with Lesson 31 in your Saxon Orange Book, and we're talking all about equations with parentheses. So this is a fun lesson because we're just learning how to solve equations. When we have a parenthesis, we always have to do what's in the parenthesis first. But since a 3 and a negative b are not like terms because they don't have the same variable parts, then we will distribute. So 2 times 3 and 2 times negative b. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative b is negative 2. b equals b minus 5. So here we have a b on the left and a b on the right. We really would like to get all of our b's on one side, and we could do it either way we want to. We could add a 2b to both sides, or we could subtract a b from both sides. I'm going to go ahead and add the 2b to both sides because I love to keep positive b's. So add a 2b, add a 2b. As long as we do the same thing to both sides, we're good, aren't we? So this 6 drops down, this cancels, equals 3b minus 5. Now what we're trying to do is find out what the b is. So we need to get this term by itself. We're going to add a 5b to get the 3b by itself, and add a 5. I think I said a 5b, it's just a 5. That cancels. We get 3b equals 11. Well, we don't want 3b, we want b. So we're going to divide this side by 3 and divide this side by 3. And b is equal to 11/3. Okay, so now let's go back in and check it. To check it, we'll throw 11/3 here and 11/3 here. So I'm just going to erase that and put in 11/3 and erase that and put in 11/3. Now I have a little problem because I don't have common denominators to make the subtraction easy. So I'm going to take this 3, I'm going to pull it out and make it 9/3, because isn't 9/3 3? Okay, and I'm going to take this 5 and I'm going to make it 15/3. 15, hold on, 5. Yes, 15/3. It's kind of late over here. My brain stops working after a while. Okay, so 15/3 is 5, right? So now we can do the math because we're just checking. 9/3 minus 11/3 would be negative 2/3. But negative 2/3 times 2 would be negative 4/3. Does that equal what we have over here? 11 minus 15/3 is negative 4/3. So since we got the same thing on both sides, it checks. And our correct answer is 11/3. Okay, here's the second example. We have a parenthesis, and we cannot do what's inside the parenthesis because we have a 1 and a 2x, and they're not like terms. We have another parenthesis, and we can't do what's in that parenthesis either. So we're going to start with distribution. So 3 times 1 is 3, plus 3 times 2x is 6x, plus 7 equals negative 4 times x. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Now here I'm going to do one step before I begin trying to get the x on one side. You see how I have a 3 and a 7? I'm going to go ahead and put those together. So 6x plus 10 equals negative 4x minus 8. I always like to simplify after I distribute, just so that I know what I'm doing before I start switching sides with everything. Do you see how I have 4x and negative 4x and a 6x? I'm going to go ahead and bring the x's over here. So I'm going to add a 4x and add a 4x, this becomes a 10x plus 10 equals negative 8. I want to get the 10x by itself, so I'm looking to get the term by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 10 to get rid of it, but I have to do the same to both sides. So now I have 10x, this cancels, and a negative 18. Okay, so I have 10x equals negative 18 because this one cancels out. So I don't want 10x, I want x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 10. So when I divide this side by 10, I get x. When I divide this side by 10, I get negative 1.8 because dividing by 10 moves the decimal one place to the left. Okay, so now let's just think about our steps. I checked to see if my parentheses could be consolidated, but they couldn't, so I distributed. I simplified. And then I start looking for where are all my x's because I want to get all my variables in one spot. So I start to deal with what I'm going to do with my x's. Then I want to get the variable term by itself. And then I want to get the variable by itself. So let's look at your book because they have the same thing written down here, but they first say eliminate the parentheses, and that's what we did. Then they say add like terms on both sides, so that's simplifying. Eliminate x on one side or the other. Get all your x's in one place. Eliminate the constant term. So in other words, we want to get the x term by itself. So we get rid of the constant term that's on the same side as the x term. So instead of eliminate the constant term, I would just say get the x term by itself. And then they say eliminate the coefficient of x. We want to get x by itself, not something times x. So they're saying the same thing that I'm saying, but I would say distribute, simplify, get your x's all together on one side, get your x term alone by getting rid of the constant that's there, if there is one, and then get your x alone by division. Okay, so like if you have a 2x, you don't want a 2x, you want an x. So you would divide both sides by 2. So here we come with the next one. Now, your book calls this negative 9/5, and negative 18/10 is negative 9/5. So they, in your book, put it as a fraction, and I put it as a decimal. But from the original problem, you don't know how they want you to leave it. So either one would have been okay. All right, so this is lesson 31, example 3. So we have this problem right here, and we're going to have to distribute because we cannot do anything with a 4 and a negative 5x. We can't combine them because they're not like terms. So we're going to distribute across. So 15 times 4 is 60 minus 15 times 5 is 75x. Now, on the other side, we also have to distribute because we cannot do anything with a 4 and a negative 6x. They're not like terms. 16 times 4 is 64, minus 16 times 6 is going to be 36. Carry the 3, so that's a 96, negative 96x plus 10. So now remember, I have x's here and x's there, but before I begin to get all my x's in one place, I always stop and simplify. 60 minus 75x is already simplified, but on the other side, let me go ahead and combine my 64 and 10, which are like terms, and now I have it as simplified as I can without getting my 96 over here. So I'm going to go ahead and look at two x terms that need to get on one side. Since I have a choice, I'm going to go ahead and move this over here by adding a 96x. Oops. 96x and adding a 96x on the left. Now this one's going to cancel. No more x terms on the right hand side. And I have opposite signs, so I'm actually subtracting these, and I'm going to get 21x, 60 plus 21x, and then on the other side is a 74. My goal is to solve for my x. So my first step is to get the x term by itself. So we need to get rid of the 60. I'm going to subtract the 60, subtract the 60 on the right, and now I end up with 21x is equal to, and now I'm going to subtract these because they're opposite signs, 4 and 14, and I'm going to get x is 14 over 21, which is 2/3. So that is the answer to number 3 example, is 2/3. Now, in distribution, okay, so when we cannot do anything inside, if we have a plus sign on the outside of the parenthesis, we can just eliminate the parenthesis. We don't have to do anything because there's nothing to distribute through. So we would just take the parenthesis off and simplify it to -4x plus -4 plus 3x. There's nothing we can do with the plus sign. It's just a +1 distributed through, which doesn't change anything. But if we have a negative on the outside of a parenthesis, we must distribute a -1 all the way through, which is simply going to change every sign. So we're going to get a -x plus a 3y minus a 6 plus a k. And once we do that, we do not put the parentheses back on because we have already taken care of the parenthesis. Okay, in this next example, we have a minus in front of a parenthesis that we cannot simplify. And because that's a minus in front, it's the same as a -1 times the parenthesis. So we're going to have 12 minus 1 times a 2x is a -2x. Minus 1 times a 5 is a -5. So it just changes the signs, and then we take the parenthesis off. -2. Since this has a plus in front of the parenthesis, we can just take off the parenthesis and keep everything the same. So now, can we simplify a little bit before we start our juggling act? We've got two like terms here. So we're going to have -2x plus 7 equals, and here we have an x minus 5. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just move my x over here. I could move my x over here. We'll do it this time just so that you can see it doesn't matter. If I add 2x and I add 2x to get my x's all the same, this one cancels, and I get 7 equals 3x minus 5. Now I'm trying to get the x term by itself, so I'll add a 5 to get rid of the -5 on both sides. And I end up with a 3x equals 12. Since 3x equals 12, x is 4 because I divide both sides by 4. Now, we're not going to check every one of these, but let's go back up and check, okay? So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. And 12, take away 13, is a -1 on the left. Let's see if we get a -1 on the right. We plug in the 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. Minus 2 is -1 on the right, and it checks. Okay, this is our last example before you start your practice problems. So here we have a parenthesis that will not simplify, so we're going to distribute the minus all the way through. Minus 4y plus 17. Both signs just change. And then plus a -y. Okay, so the plus in the front means I can just pull off the parentheses, and I get -y equals. Now on the other side, I just have nothing in front of the parenthesis. Nothing is being distributed, so I'm just going to take that parenthesis off. But here I have a minus a -y, which is a -1 times a -y, which is a +y. Okay, so now these two are like terms. and I'll get a negative 5y plus 17, and then 2y and y are like terms, so I get a 3y minus 1. So now I've got to get this over here or this over here. So this one is already positive. Let's just move this one over here. So plus 5y cancels. 17 equals 8y minus 1. So can I add a 1 and add a 1 to the other side? Okay, so we end up with 8y equals 18. Yeah, 18. 8y is 18. Divide by 8. Divide by 8. And we'll have 9/4 equals y. All right, so here we have our first practice problem. So copy it down and pause your video. First thing we're going to do is distribute across, aren't we? Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 times negative c is positive 3c. And over here we have c minus 2. So now we're going to get all of our c's on one side. We're going to subtract a c and subtract a c. And that's a 1c, right? So we get negative 6 plus 2c equals negative 2. So now we're going to add a 6 to get rid of the 6 that is bothering our 2c. And we end up getting 2c is 4. Okay, so if 2c is 4, then isn't c equal to 2? Now, let's put this back in and check it. If I plug in a 2 for c, don't I get a 0? If I plug in a 2 for c over here, don't I get a 0 on this side? And it isn't negative 3 times 0 equal to 0? All right, here's your second practice problem. So copy it down. Go off and do your work. See if you get the right answer. Here we go. We have a negative. We can't do anything about what's inside the parentheses, so we're going to distribute a negative across the parenthesis. On the right, we can't do anything inside the parenthesis, but we can distribute the 4. 28c minus 32 plus 3. Now, the only simplification we can do is right here. Negative 6c plus 5 equals 28c minus 29. So now we need to get all of our c's together. Since we have a 28 positive over here, let's just add a 6c to both sides. That cancels. We get 5 equals 34c minus 29. So now we want this all by itself. So let's add a 29 to that side and add a 29 to that side. So now we get 34c equals 34. So that means c equals 1. That was easy, wasn't it? All right, here's our last practice problem. So go ahead and copy it down and pause your video. Okay, so on this one, notice that I can do something about this parenthesis. I have a 7 minus 9, which is a negative 2. So I have a negative 2z. So that's going to be a positive 2z. And I can simplify that right away. And then on the other side, I can also, I'm just making sure I copied my problem right, that's a negative 4. And a negative 4 times an 8 is a negative 32. So now I have a 2z minus a 6z is a negative 4z is equal to a negative 32. Divide by 4 on both sides, negative 4 on both sides, and z is equal to 8. Okay, so that one was very easy because I did not have to distribute. I already had something I could work on inside the parenthesis to make it easier. So now if z is 8, this was what? 2 times 8, which is 16, minus 6 times 8, which is negative 48. And when I subtract those, I do get negative 32. And it checks. And that is the end of lesson 31. And this is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.